Okay, today what we're going to do is look at a concept map for chapter 3. And again, you want to have your objectives out, your outlines out and looking at your objectives. So objective number 1 is looking at how cells make and modify organic structure. We're thinking about functional groups. We are looking at what those chemical reactions are that are important to building and breaking down molecules. So let's look at section 3.2. So we can title this Molecules of Life as our main concept. And our first major piece out to the side here is going to look at, how those things actually come together. So some things that are important: functional groups. And we want to make sure that we know that the functional groups are what are involved in the behavior of the molecule. That's a really key piece. They also act as an ID tag, and that tells us what type of molecule it actually is. Secondly, we're going to also look at metabolism and what that really means. And essentially, metabolism is any chemical reaction. So any reaction that occurs within the cells. And we've got two major ones that we're looking at in this chapter, and those two major metabolic activities are what are going to be the heart of every single one of these molecules of life, because this is how we go from small parts to big molecules, or big molecules to small parts. And those two big chemical reactions are condensation and hydrolysis. So condensation, we're going from small to big, and we get water. So water results. In hydrolysis, we go from big to small, and we use water to split. So we're going to split the bonds. So a type of condensation reaction, an example of one, would be what happens in photosynthesis, where we take carbon dioxide and water, and those things are involved in making glucose. So we take these tiny little pieces and we make a big molecule. In hydrolysis, we're going from big to small, remember, and so that would be like your digestive processes. So we're taking these big molecules that come in, we're splitting them with water, and we're making smaller pieces that then we can use in condensation to build bigger molecules. So those are some of the most important, those two reactions are the two most important reactions that you need to know that are going on in metabolism. And that's what gives rise to every single one of our molecules of life: our fats, our proteins, our carbohydrates, and our nucleic acids. So those two major reactions are very important. Let's go back and talk a little bit about functional groups again. I said that they were ID tags for the type of molecule. So let's think about the types of molecules that we have. So we've got carbs, we've got proteins, we've got lipids, and we've got nucleic acids. So you want to think about, in the carbohydrate, we've got a C double bond O. It's a carbonyl group, and that's what identifies it as a carbohydrate. In a protein, we've got two different groups. We've got an amine group, which is the NH2. That has the nitrogen on it. And then we have a C double bonded O, OH, which is a carboxyl group. And that's what gives its acidic property. So that's how we come up with an amino acid. In the lipid group, we also use that carboxyl group because we've got fatty acids that we have. In nucleic acids, we've got some sugars that are involved there. And so we would also have that C double bond O, like our carbohydrate, our simple sugars. And in our protein group, we will also have a sulfur interaction, sulfur hydrogen interaction, or sulfahydryl functional group that's involved there. Lipids, we can have an OH group, which is our alcohol group. So we're going to connect our glycerol, which is our alcohol, to our fatty acid, which is our with our carboxyl group. So those are some of the major functional groups that you should know, or at least be able to recognize. And I think I told you before that you would have it in a matching section on your exam. So let's talk a little bit about carbohydrates. And we need to know what their function is. And we know that they're involved in quick energy and also in structure of things, particularly plant cell structure, cell wall structure. So that's important in terms of their function. We also want to focus on their structure. What are they made out of? So we have simple sugars, which are the basis for all others. So these guys are the monomer. So they are the basis for everything else. So we can make a disaccharide from it, we can make an oligosaccharide from it, or we can make a polysaccharide. Disaccharides, remember, are two sugars put together, and those are things like your sucrose, things like lactose. Our oligosaccharides can usually hook to something else, and those are like the ID tags on the cell, and that's what keeps your immune system from attacking your body, are those ID tags. Polysaccharides come in two forms, so we've got ones that just do food storage and ones that are involved in structure. So we've got the possibility of amylose or starch as one of our storage, or glycogen that we see in animals. In structure, we've got chitin that we see in animals. That's, remember, the cockroach crunch. And then we've got cellulose, which is the structure of plant cell walls. So with all of these, what you want to do is you want to focus on structure and function. How are carbs important in structure and in function? So for this little section that we just did with carbohydrates, that was section 3.3 on your outline. We looked at function, and then part B, we looked at structure. We had simple sugars. So we had disaccharides, and then we looked at oligosaccharides, or the short chain carbohydrates, and then we looked at complex, which are the polysaccharides, and we divided that up into the way plants store it, the way animals store it, the way plants use it, the way animals use it. And so you should know, make sure you know those. Now, for lipids, we are looking at the 4 different types of lipids. So we've got fats, we've got phospholipids, we've got waxes, and we have steroids. And so our lipids, in terms of function, are there to be able to serve as long-term energy. They also are involved in insulation. We also can make hormones from them. Now, with our fats, we're looking at 2 different types of fats: unsaturated and saturated. Remember, the unsaturated fats are the ones that have a double bond between the carbons, at least one double bond between the carbons. The saturated fats have all carbons and hydrogens. So they are saturated completely with hydrogens. Saturated fats, think about this, saturated and being solid at room temperature. Unsaturated fats are liquid at room temperature. Now I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to let you fill in what you think phospholipids, waxes, steroids should have, and then you're going to have an arm for proteins, and you're going to have an arm for nucleic acids. And then I will have an additional lecture to go back and look at those things to see how closely our maps match.